Hi, this is a office mix for the topic of the Great Leap Forward. It's suitable for students who are studying China for paper 2. It's probably not detailed enough if you're doing China for paper 3 for the IB, but it will get you started. So the reading that's highlighted here comes from Asia for Educators by Columbia University, and it's a document-based question about Mao kind of driving forward the party and looking at the masses as the key mobilizers of China's economic development. So it's worth searching that out if you're interested. So this is happening in the context of what Mao considers to be successes perhaps after the first 5-year plan. Remember, the Great Leap Forward is China's second 5-year plan. And there's an increasing level of foreign hostility from China towards both the Soviet Union as a result of de-Stalinisation from Khrushchev and as a result of the Taiwan issue in 1958, where the US gets involved. Remember, of course, that China will see that purely as a domestic issue. So increasing international isolation, some apparent successes from the first 5-year plan, or at least that's how the government chose to interpret. After Khrushchev's de-Stalinisation speech of 1956, then Mao has become increasingly concerned that the Soviet model is not perhaps appropriate for China, it isn't working in the way that they saw fit, and those ideas from the Soviet Union becoming more and more unpopular in China, and particularly with Mao himself. There's certainly been some failings with some of the agricultural models that the Soviet Union had shared with the Chinese. Remember, though, China still owes the Soviet Union money as a result of those early loans that Mao secured in 1949 and 1950. So part of a substantial portion of the Chinese harvests at this time are going to the Soviet Union to repay those loans negotiated 8 or 9 years earlier. Mao was worried about agriculture, and obviously he wanted to see agriculture as a foundation for industrial development, just the same if you study the Soviet Union, just the same as in the Soviet Union. In order for industry to happen, agriculture has to become more efficient, and there were key areas there where perhaps Mao was not as pleased as he might have been with the success towards collectivization. The first 5-year plan, of course, has developed fairly efficiently at this time in terms of the MATs and the APCs, but Mao, obviously, revolutionary that he is, wanted more. There was an attempt in China certainly to keep experts on board perhaps for a bit longer than there was in the Soviet Union. But even so, Mao was increasingly concerned about the differences in wages between skilled and unskilled workers. And this was really coming from 1956 onwards. Of course, he didn't want to see what had happened in the Soviet Union with that emergence of a kind of elite group of planners and managers that had happened there. And of course, a good example of that would be the sort of Stakhanovite movement and those kind of sort of capitalistic incentives that were offered to productive workers, and Mao wants to make sure that doesn't happen in China. So he's concerned again about another learning experience from the Soviet Union. He wants to see China independent. It is Britain that is focused on, and the idea that China would be able to catch up with Britain. Alan Lawrence on page 160 of his book has the speech from which that idea of overtaking Britain is taken, and again you can see comparisons there made with British industrialisation, which of course happened over a period of a couple of 100 years, as opposed to China planning to do it in a few years there. But Mao also has people at heart. Remember, the masses, the engagement of the ordinary people is central to Mao's political ideology. And he also wants to create a Chinese communist country that is going to be abundant, where people are active participants in the economic output of the country. So to reduce unemployment and underemployment is another element as he's beginning to form his ideas for the Great Leap Forward. Again, those of you who have studied the Soviet Union will be familiar with the kind of huge projects, the Dnieper Dam, the White Sea Canal that are put in by Stalin, and very similar things happen also in China. And again, with that idea that more efficient agriculture release peasants to become industrial and construction workers and lead the Chinese people into an industrialization program. So big, huge publicity projects that will also serve functions, and of course massive engineering undertakings. Just again, as in the Soviet Union, the idea of shaping people, their mindset, their lives, and certainly the Great Leap Forward will continue the work that the Chinese communes have done in terms of agriculture, in terms of creches and kindergartens, in terms of shared canteens. All of those types of ideas would be coming through. He doesn't want to develop industry in the same way that's happened in the Soviet Union with the mega industrial cities of places like Magnitogorsk, but instead will turn the millions of Chinese peasants into their own industry and into their own industrial workers. So there is an opportunity here for people to engage in patriotic enthusiasm, and people do in their millions, to make a contribution to China's industrial efforts. And the backyard furnace, of course, as you're probably aware, is a disaster. People are melting down their cooking pots and bedsteads and window frames to make utterly useless steel. Again, Mao is looking for independence from the Soviet Union, but also wants to increase the influence of the provincial agencies. That will actually change, and he'll begin to centralize later. Again, another good comparison there with the Soviet Union. So one of a really good video here is from the China, A Century of Revolution series. This link will take you to an extract from that, and if you want to watch that, you want to probably click to the Great Leap Forward, and scroll to about 36 minutes, and watch it for about 20 minutes. That will cover kind of causes, events, and the consequences of the Great Leap Forward. So we'll leave part 1 of the Great Leap Forward there, and then we'll come back and have a look at the results and consequences of the Great Leap Forward. Thanks for watching.